Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspection Education Center. Tonight we have Susan Jeanette, Program Director for the Partnership of Realty and Oil Heat Success. And she's going to be talking to us about Bioheat and oil and a bunch of stuff tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to Susan, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. And I know you're all super excited about my topic, oil heat. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about oil heat? Well, the truth is that it's not your grandfather's oil anymore. And there are a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of modern strides going on. And I'm here to share that with you. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Today's class is interactive. So if there's something you'd like to interject, please unmute yourself, ask me. I would love to engage you in a conversation. I can't see you, so go ahead and text if you want to. But when I'm on Zoom and I teach and I can see my students, I have trouble when everybody's texting. So I ask them pretend they're not texting and at least hide it away from the screen. The other thing, we're going to get into some sensitive topics when it comes to the U.S. Reserve and whatnot. And I am asking there be no mention of politics. We're not here to talk politics. We're here to talk oil heat. So let me continue. One mandatory housekeeping item. We do need to take about a minute and a half break if Amazon delivers, because these are all animals in my house. I own a rescue and they are residents at the moment. And if Amazon delivers, believe me, all hell will break out in my home. So I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to mute myself if that happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Today's education is brought to you by the National Oil Heat Research Alliance. That is the National Association for Oil Heat. And it is also brought to you today by SEMA, which is the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association. They both provide this for you. And the company that I work for is Partnership for Realty and Oil Heat Success. The realty part is that we deal with real estate and we educate both realtors and home inspectors. I personally travel the country in person or on Zoom, educating both realtors and home inspectors and helping you get your continuing education credits. So we've been doing this for a very long time, and that's where our information comes from. This is a nonprofit program, and because it's nonprofit, you see, we're all paid for by an educational grant that we fight like hell to get every single year. We have to lobby for it. But we are a nonprofit, which means I can't endorse, recommend, refer any one particular oil company, there's the dogs, any one particular anybody to you. Because I represent the industry as a whole. And I like it that way because it keeps my education pure. And the bottom line is you guys are out there, you're in basements every day, dealing with home buyers, asking you a gazillion questions, sellers checking in on you, and the realtors who know everything, right? They just know everything there is to know about everything. And you have to be prepared to discuss with them as well. So that's what I bring to the table. Now, I hope you'll forgive me, but I'm also a realtor, and I try to keep that on the DL. But I've been a licensed New Jersey realtor since 1987. I was born and raised in a real estate family, and all I've ever done is real estate, in addition to becoming an oil heat specialist. And I have been running this program nationally since 2008. I'm also an animal rescuer, which is why there's so many animals in my house right now. I foster, they're not mine, and they make noise. So that's who I am, just to let you know. Enough about me. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight. I kept it down to a few topics. We're going to talk about bioheat. I'm sure that you guys are aware of Bioheat. There's a lot of buzz around Bioheat. I want to tell you the down low about it. I want to tell you what's going on with Bioheat. It is the next generation oil heat alternative. I teach realtors how to walk into a basement, look at an above ground tank, and look for signs that that tank is at imminent risk of a leak. I want to show you what I teach them as well. You may know, and you probably do, but it can't hurt to hear it again. I want to teach you about today's double wall tanks and the $1 million warranty you can get with a particular brand. We're going to talk about system upgrades, how old is too old, why do we see these pre-turn of the century converted coal burners still heating these gorgeous Connecticut homes. I mean, they have modern kitchens, they're beautiful, new baths, new roofs, magnificent landscaping, and you go in the basement and they have these old clunkers still heating the houses. So we're going to talk about that, how to diffuse the fear factor with that. Replacement costs, realistic expectations, because what they think and what it may actually cost to replace those old systems may not align. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, I've got money in my pocket to share with you, because one of the best kept secrets in Connecticut is that through SEMA, the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association, and through the grant money from NORA, the National Oil Heat Research Alliance, families can get up to $1,900 in new equipment rebates. That's a really good topic. It's a good thing for you to share if you're inspecting a home, you have the buyers there with you, the system, you know it needs to be replaced. And you can, I know that you guys like to keep it gentle for the realtors, and to keep the buyers from panicking. You can deliver that information. Hey, there's money. So that's what you'll have as well. Believe it or not, there are still people out there who believe it's Jed Clampett's oil. And I know in Connecticut, oil heat is everywhere. I understand that. But there are people moving into Connecticut from places like New York City, because that's dying out now. Since the pandemic, everybody's jumping ship and coming to Connecticut. And there are still people who believe that oil heat is like black gold. It's Texas tea, it's bubbling crude. And when I teach to hundreds of realtors at a time, and I poll the audience, what color do you think oil heat is? I get answers across the board. They say it's black. They say it's brown. The realtors say it's yellow. They say it's amber, that it's light and yellow, that it's clear, that it's red, that it's green. I get all these answers. And the thing is that if the realtors out there don't know the answer, I can guarantee you that the clients, the customers that you're talking to have no clue either. So keeping that in mind, I know part of your job is to educate the buyer who has brought you in to do a home inspection. And that can be part of your education, and just ask them, what color do you think oil heat is? And you'll learn a lot when they answer. Because the way oil has been depicted back in the day, that's it right there. You can see, people think back to when oil was depicted as shooting in the air, and wherever it touched, it was like molasses. It was like black and dirty and yucky. And people have this impression of heating oil being like that, not wanting your kids near it, that heating oil dealers have dirty nails, that they have black hands, black from the oil. And that's the impression that people have. The truth of the matter is that heating oil has been through an incredible metamorphosis over the years. Today's modern generation heating oil is crystal clear. It looks like baby oil. It is that clear. It has just been refined and refined and refined. And here's a little fun fact that I don't know, maybe you don't know. I wish we were in person so I could look in your eyes and ask you. But did you know that diesel at the pumps at the gas station is pure heating oil? Did you know that? Diesel is heating oil, and they dye it. They dye it either green or red. Why? Why do they dye it those colors? Well, because the truckers caught on that diesel at the pumps is pure heating oil. And the truckers started to get really smart. They started getting oil tanks and getting deliveries of, lots of heating oil. And they were fueling their 18 wheelers across the country with tax-free heating oil. And that was a genius idea because they were saving lots of money until the government caught on. And when the government caught on, they said that's tax evasion and that's going to be illegal. So the government mandated that diesel at the pumps be dyed a particular color, either green or red. And you can tell by the handles at the gas station. The red is not taxed. The red dyed heating oil is intended for lawnmowers, for tractors, for fields, for farmers, and all of that. So the red diesel is for off-road vehicles. Green diesel is what the troopers are looking for, because when they pull these 18-wheelers over to inspect something, and you see the troopers walking around and walking around the truck and looking for problems, one of the things the troopers are doing is putting a dipstick in their gas tank to make sure it's the right shade of green. And if it isn't, they can go to jail. They can get a criminal record, and they can get up to 6 months in jail for using non-taxable diesel in their trucks. Now, why do I tell you this? A good thing that you can say when you're working with a buyer who's never had heating oil before, maybe it's a first-time buyer, maybe it's somebody that's moving in from out of the area, you can say, here's a fun fact for you. You never have to worry about paying for a premium delivery from your heating oil dealer if you forgot to get a fill. You never have to worry about running out. Just go to the gas station and fill a little jug with diesel from the pumps, either red or green. Red is better because there's no charge, no taxes. But go get some diesel, put it in your tank, and it'll hold you over so you don't have to pay a premium fee for a delivery same day. That's a really good thing just in conversation to throw out to a buyer. That is perfectly fine for the tanks. It's perfectly fine for the systems because it's just pure heating oil. But tell them that color matters, that when they buy that storage container, it has to be yellow because they're, you guys know this, they're color coded. Red is for gasoline, blue is for kerosene, and the green is for lubricant. So the yellow is designed for diesel. So there's a little fun fact for you to talk about. Let's talk about, before we get to Bioheat, which I know everybody is interested in, we would be remiss to talk about oil heat without talking about the elephant in the room last winter. Everybody's talking about the price of oil heat last winter. It went sky high. In Connecticut, whether you know that oil heat went high, if you don't heat with oil, if you drove a car, you knew that prices were high last year because heating oil and gasoline come from the same source, and that's crude oil. And in Connecticut, it hit a major, major high last year. And it scared a lot of people. It concerned a lot of people. There was the fear of volatility. the fear of not being able to afford to heat their homes. And it's a real fear for people. So let's talk about what happened last year. First of all, crude oil is a commodity that's traded on Wall Street. And anytime we look at something that spikes up high like that on Wall Street, it is generally followed by a big sell off and comes right back down and quickly. And oil was no different than that. This is not our first rodeo with a spike like this. And if you think back, we've seen this before. In July 2008, boy, did it scare a lot of people. Because for most people, this was the first time in their entire lives that they had ever seen in Connecticut gas prices go towards $5 a gallon, which was absolutely unheard of, and then broaching $6. In July, we saw it happen. And it also happened to oil heat. The prices went high, 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 and they just kept going higher and higher. Now, some of us in this webinar today saw it happen one other time. But the thing is that in July 2008, when it shot up like that, within a few short months, it slammed right back down to low normal. And people don't remember that. They just remember that it spiked really, really high, and they forget they had relief very soon after. And it stayed low for 14 years. In fact, oil heat is notoriously low over time, except for these blips that have happened. And unfortunately, we just had one happen last winter. But before that, before last winter, so that's 2022. Then before that was 2008. And before that, the last time there was a spike, some of you remember this. I know you do. The notorious odd even days of the 70s. I remember it. You couldn't just go to the gas station at will and fill your tank because you could only fill your tank if the last digit on your license plate correlated with what day it was. So if it was an even day, like the 2nd, the 8th, the 12th, the 26th, you could fill your tank on those days, and vice versa for odd days. But you couldn't just fill your tank. You could get online to fill your tank. And in many cases, you would stay on that line for 3 hours. I can still feel the headache from sitting in the back seat of my mother's Chrysler. And I remember because back in those days, her window was cracked ever so slightly, and she was sucking on her cigarettes the whole 3 hours. The car was filled with smoke, and the headaches, I remember them. And then by the time you went up it was your turn, they either rationed it down to like 10 gallons or it was too late. The big sign came up that said, sorry, out of gas, and you were just out of luck. Now, why did we have to do odd even days? Why was that? You see, that was a rationing system that was instituted by our government nationally. Because back in the 70s, we were 100% dependent on the Middle East for crude oil. We didn't have our own supply. And when the war broke out in the 70s in the Middle East, they declared a moratorium and they wouldn't sell us the supplies that we needed to fuel our country. So we had to go on a rationing system. But we learned our lesson back in the 70s. We learned that a superpower like the United States, we could never be dependent again on another country for something that fuels our entire infrastructure. So we began stockpiling. We began stockpiling underground, in caverns, in salt caverns out in Texas and Louisiana. And boy, did we begin saving. We stockpiled over 1 billion gallons, which is the current number of oil in the United States underground that we keep for emergencies. So when you hear, it's a buzz phrase, when you hear on the news, they'll report what the U.S. strategic, what they call it, the U.S. Reserve. The U.S. Reserve is at 1 billion gallons. You'll hear them say that now. And then you think to yourself, well, what I'm saying makes no sense because I just told you that today we are foreign independent. We are solely reliant on ourselves for oil. So why did our prices go sky high in 2002? Well, you know that it was the start of the Ukraine war when Russia declared war on the Ukraine. And here's what happened. On December 5th, Russia wasn't making enough inroads for hurting the Ukraine. So instead, they decided to declare an energy war. You see, in Europe, they are 100% dependent on Russia for their fuel. So Russia declared on December 5th, we will no longer supply crude oil to any country who aligns with the Ukraine. Any country who supports the Ukraine, no. And furthermore, any country who is a friend of the United States, they would also refuse to send any supplies to them. So they were freezing out our friends in Europe. Now you see why I'm asking for no politics here. Well, the thing is that the United States, when our friends, our allies are in peril, at risk of freezing to death in the cold winter, have no gas for their transportation, their infrastructure is on the verge of shutting down, what do? We step up. And the United States began exporting from our billion gallons to those countries at risk that were our friends in Europe. And then the next thing that happened was it was the basics of supply and demand. Our supplies got lower, demand was high, and prices went high. So what did we learn from all of this? And these are some good points that you can mention to particularly first-time buyers, the young buyers who are just learning how to own an oil-heated home. Tell them, don't panic purchase your oil if prices go up again. You see, back in 2008, what happened was it was the first time most people ever saw prices go so high. And a lot of people panicked and they thought prices are going high, high, high. Every day they're spiking. I don't think I'm going to be able to afford to heat my home. So many people jumped on the bandwagon and locked in for a full year to stop it at a fixed price. And they had a contract to do that. And they thought if prices go higher, we're going to be at least insulated from continuing rising prices. But what did we learn? Prices slammed right back down to low normal in just a few months. And everybody who was locked in at a fixed rate were stuck there at that rate for a full year because they had committed to it. While their friends who didn't were able to buy low-priced oil. So then you say to yourself, you know, the oil dealers, I know them. They're really nice guys. They're friends of the community. Their kids go to school with our kids. Why don't they just cut these families a break and just rip up that contract and just give them normal priced fuel, low normal? Because the thing is, the local oil dealers are not big oil. Their family businesses trying to keep ahead also, trying to get through a tough time. And when a customer commits to a locked in rate for a year, they go and buy that years worth of supply at that rate with big oil. Big oil isn't going to cut anybody a break. And the oil dealers can't afford to eat the difference in prices. Whoever made the commitment has to pay for it. So what did we learn? Don't panic buy. Ask about a cap rate program. This became very popular after 2008. If you don't know what a cap rate program is, it's the best of both worlds. And the way it works, you call up and you say, I'd like to lock in at your cap rate today for a year. So it will never, like the fixed, it will never go above the cap rate. You are safe at that cap rate. But the win-win, when prices drop, and they always do, when prices drop, you get the lower price. That's fantastic. It will usually cost you a couple $100 to lock in at a cap rate, but here's a little trick I know because I'm in the oil heat industry. Shop around. Because when things are tough, oil dealers may make some concessions to try to convince you to become their customer. They want you to get away from the guy across the street and come over to your company. And you may ask if there are any incentive cap rate programs to sign up with your company, and they may waive that fee. I can't guarantee it, but it's something that could happen. The other thing is tell your buyers to go on a budget plan. Doesn't mean they can't afford it. It doesn't mean they can't budget their money. It just means that when we have cold in our area, in New England, in New Jersey, we are going through most of our heating supplies in about 5 or 6 months. We are getting fills from like November, December, January, February, March, a little bit less in April, like that. In January, in February, in December, depending on the cycle of the year, you could be getting 2 fills in 1 month. And that's when Christmas time happens, right around there. So on a budget plan, what you can do, instead of shelling out all that money, and during a hard time, it could be $4,000 or $5,000 for those 4 or 5 months. You can spread those payments out evenly over a whole year. Many companies will give you a 12-month budget plan, so you make even payments, even in the summer when you're not using it, but that offsets what's happening to you in the winter, and it makes it much easier. And as prices drop, your budget numbers drop. If prices rise, your numbers will rise too. But imagine if you had to pay for a full tank alone at the higher number. And everybody should be on automatic delivery today. It just makes such good sense. Let your oil dealer make sure you don't run out. That's something you can also mention to them. So let's move on into the solution. Price hikes are pretty scary. And back what happened in 2008, the oil industry took notice. And, there was also a lot of chat going on about fossil fuels, a lot of chatter. And the industry realized that they had to be prepared for the future. And so Bioheat is a solution in the making. It started about 2008, and it's here now. It's a long-term solution. It is all plant-based. It's renewable, biodegradable, homegrown. It's an oil heat alternative. And it's made with sunflowers and soybeans and farmed algae and cleaned, recycled cooking oil from the restaurants and from the French fries that everybody's eating. It's all cleaned and purified and broken down into a very fine particulate. That is the recipe for Bioheat. One of the things that they've just recently started adding is melted animal fat, because, you butcher a cow and you take the meat, or a pig or an animal, and you take the meat and you throw away the fat. Well, that fat that has been thrown in the garbage can be melted down into renewable fuel. And that's now part of the recipe as well. Notice that something is missing from the recipe, from the equation. Corn. They left corn out. And that feels odd because corn is it's ethanol, right? Corn is known to be in gasoline. But the reason they left corn out of this recipe, corn oil, is because number one, ethanol has proven to be so expensive. And the whole point is to get prices more stabilized. And number two, livestock feed on the corn across our country. It's a staple diet for our livestock. And it's a staple diet on our family tables across the country. And they didn't want to solve one problem by creating another shortage. So corn was deliberately left out of the equation. So the way Bioheat works, it is a blend of heating oil. So they take heating oil and the recipe for biofuels, and they blend it together. There are refineries out in the Midwest, and before the oil gets to us, they are blended in these refineries. And the way they're blended is based on whatever the oil dealer orders up. They can blend it any way they want. But I want to tell you that Connecticut is one of the pioneers in advancing bioheat. And Connecticut was one of the first of 2 states in our country to mandate that bio blend be used by every oil dealer in Connecticut. It became mandatory and it was no longer permitted to deliver pure bioheat. Doesn't require any changes to the oil heat system, no retrofit, and it proves to be very good for our environment. So, how did this happen? How did bioheat slip in and become mandated? Well, you can't just say we're going to use a new fuel. You have to prove that that it works and that it's good for the environment and that it's good for your system, that nothing's going to happen. So before Congress would approve bioheat to be blended, there had to be a control done, an experiment. And Rhode Island volunteered to be that experiment. 2 oil dealers in Rhode Island volunteered to deliver only 100% plant-based biofuel, just bio, to all of their customers. Rhode Island was a perfect place for an experiment. In New England, it's very cold. And in Rhode Island, they are just known for having these old clunkers. They have these old systems that are still heating their homes. So it was a perfect control environment. And at the end of the year, they were required to submit a report to Congress on what they found, their findings. I actually sat in at the NORA meeting where it was presented. It was very interesting. The 2 owners of the 2 oil companies were up on stage presenting it. And here's what they found: less middle of the night breakdowns, less maintenance issues, less service calls, both independently without comparing one another, came up with the same results, that it was better for the systems, that because it was such a smooth and clean lubricant like formula, it was cleaning the systems as it was going through. So that is how bioheat came to be. And the industry is currently in the process of transitioning to full bioheat, not just bioblend, full bioheat. In 2023, you see, this happened before 2023. Today or last year, it was recommended across the country that oil dealers deliver a 20% blend to their customers, meaning 20% plant-based and 80% oil heat. I know of companies who do more than that voluntarily. There is a company in Massachusetts, in Newton, Massachusetts, who delivers only a 50-50 blend because they believe in it and because their clientele are like the tree huggers. They're like all about the environment, and that's what they wanted. So they deliver a 50-50 blend right now. The industry is asking for all dealers across the country to be delivering a 50-50 blend by 2030. And by the year 2050, it's predicted that there will be no more fossil fuel heating oil heated homes. It will just be the all plant-based biodegradable Bioheat that is heating these homes. So what's different about Bioheat? It's an ultra low sulfur fuel, meaning it reduces the carbon footprint. This is what we're about right now. We are about renewable. Less middle of the night breakdowns. As I said, it's renewable. And it's 100% made in our country. There are farmers already contracted to be growing the ingredients for Bioheat. They are sent through the refineries. The oil heat is blended in the refineries, and then it continues on to be delivered to your local oil dealers. And right now, the price is exactly the same. They have not adjusted the price. Why? They don't know what it's going to be. Until they can mass produce this, they can't figure out how low they can get this price. It's kind of like if you go to a Costco and you buy bulk, the unit price is cheaper. Well, they're not doing the big bulk yet. So once they get to a higher blend and they can do the big bulk, the unit prices will come down and down. And that's the point of this. Nothing has to be done to your heating system, whether it's a new system or an old system. No retrofit whatsoever. And your oil dealer is not going to go out of business. Your local oil dealer will just be delivering bio instead of oil heat. And guys, I'm sure that you've heard of this before because you keep up with this stuff. So you're going to probably notice or tell the buyers that you're working with, pay attention to the oil trucks on the road. You're going to start seeing that Bioheat logo, the green leaf logo, because they all have it on their trucks now. Before I move on, any questions about Bioheat? Feel free to mute yourself. I know I gave you a lot of information, so I'll just keep going. All right. So when they follow you around, and I know you love that, and they're like watching everything you do, and they're asking you all sorts of questions. These are some of the things that I've seen buyers say, because I'm still a realtor. I still sell on the weekends. So I see my clients doing this too. They say, I don't know, oil heat, it's not modern. It's like from my parents' generation. People think it's grandpa's fuel. That's the impression that people have, and they're negative towards it. And in many times, they're negative for no reason. Like they don't even know why. In many cases, it's because a significant person planted seeds in their head that stuck, and they determined their opinion based on hearsay. Now, the problem is that that's my generation who did that, because my generation remembers back in the day going to grandma's house. You walk into grandma's old Victorian, her old the crackly colonial, and inside grandma's house, you always smelled something wonderful because she was home baking. So there was always something wonderful. But you also always smelled oil heat. That house always smelled like oil heat. And if it wasn't your grandmother's house, it was your friend's grandmother's house. It was just common to smell oil heat back in the day because they didn't know back then what we know now. And what we know now is that if you smell oil in an oil heated home, it's an indication there's a problem with the furnace or the boiler and you need to call for service. That's an indication something's not right with the system. And these are things that you can just kind of mention because a healthy oil heated home should never smell like oil. And if you notice as you're walking around the house and you see the radiators and there's like those streaks behind the radiators, point it out to your buyer. They're noticing. They think those streaks is soot. Oil heated home, that must be soot on the walls. You need to tell them because in their mind, they're thinking, I don't want my baby breathing in that soot in the air. But you need to tell them what it is. It is just common household dust that has floated down in the air. The heat of the radiator has baked it onto the wall in a pattern. So that's what I tell them. And if the seller isn't within earshot, I usually say something like, they really need to get out some Windex and clean the dust behind the radiators. It's just dust. We'll talk about this, but they just assume that it's inefficient because it's oil heat. And of course, if there's an underground oil tank and it's a really old home, hell, that must be leaking. Well, I bet you know this, and it's counterintuitive. The older a home with one of the original oil tanks underground, the least likely it is to be leaking. I mean, I'm not saying never. We would never make that statement. But it's not as likely to be leaking because the old oil tanks were solid. They had thick walls and nothing could penetrate them. The acidity of the soil couldn't get through. The rust from inside couldn't get through. They weren't the leakers. So what homes do we worry about? And I'm sure you do. When you're working at a home and you hear they have an underground oil tank, your antennas probably go up if it's a home that was built during the Vietnam War era. Because during the Vietnam War, we were sending a lot of our supplies out to the military, and so were other countries. So we had less steel domestically here in the United States to manufacture our tanks. The walls were thinner. And it's only in retrospect when we evaluate the tanks that have leaked, we see a lot of the leakers are from that period because the tanks were not strong enough. So that's another little heads up, a red flag. No matter what you say, you talk in one ear, it comes out the other. The bottom line is today's oil heat has near zero emissions, and it's 95% cleaner today than it was even 40 years ago when I graduated high school. You got to make fun of yourself. If you can't, then you're not living life. Yes, do you have a question or are you just humored?
Just laughing.
Okay. So let's talk about today's modern generation heating oil storage tanks. They look a lot different. They're not those bulbous tanks. And most people really don't need those 550-gallon tanks. They don't, the 1,000. You know why they put those 1,000-gallon tanks in? Because automatic delivery wasn't as perfect as it is today. There's never a reason to stockpile 1,000 gallons of oil on your property. Even a 275-gallon storage tank on your property is perfectly sufficient because your oil dealer makes their rounds. They're on the road all the time. And when you're down to around 30%, they're filling your tank from outside. You know this. So anyway, If they ask you, we have to replace our tank, what should we replace it with? Well, there's really no reason to replace it with anything bigger than a 275-gallon tank. Now, I'm not allowed to endorse any particular product. However, the Roth is pretty darn wonderful. You see, the Roth makes a double wall tank that is phenomenal. You've seen it. You see them out there. The Roth tank is a tank within a tank. They have a tank inside the tank. The outside is made of corrosion resistant steel. It's very shiny. It's not as ugly as the other tanks. But the beauty of the Roth tank is the tank inside the tank is where the oil is going. It's going to the tank inside the tank. And if it leaks, an alarm goes off and it leaks within itself. But the thing is, the Roth company, I'm not endorsing them. I'm just giving you a fact. The Roth oil tank, if you buy the double wall tank, it comes with a 25-year, $1 million warranty against manufacturer defect. $1 million. And it's transferable when they sell the house from the seller to the buyer. And why are they so confident that their tanks won't leak? Because the tank within the tank is made of a material that is modeled after Tupperware. Grandma will tell you Tupperware doesn't leak. Grandma's got like Tupperware in the back of the fridge from 40 years ago. Don't open it, but it won't leak. So the tank inside the tank is basically Tupperware, and that's what they're filling with oil. I mean, they learn their lesson. They know.
Susan, we have a question on that.
Yes.
One of our inspectors has seen about 40 Roth tanks where the alarm has gone off, and most of those tanks are less than 8 years old.
Well, that's telling you there's a problem with that batch, right?
Okay.
That sounds to me like a manufacturer defect, and I would contact Ross for that.
Okay.
Good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the beauties that are still in the basement. These tanks are supposed to last about 25 years. Yeah, that wasn't put in 25 years ago. And we see them. We see them in the basements of these old houses, in the corners with cobwebs all over them. The kids aren't allowed to go near it. Nobody wants to go near it. Well, they weren't supposed to be there forever. And while it may not be leaking now, we can see with our naked eye 3 definitive things that could tell us that it is at risk of leaking anytime. Number 1, we are going to look to the underbelly. The underbelly should be perfectly straight. It should be the same shape as the top. If the underbelly is curving a little, if it's starting to bulge ever so slightly, that's an indication that after holding the weight of a full tank of oil past its life expectancy, over time, the steel underneath is beginning to spread. It's getting thinner underneath, and it is at risk of leaking. The second thing you're going to look right to the legs. Is there like a kneecap starting to form on the legs? Is the knee looking like it's on the way to buckling? If that leg buckles and the tank hits the floor, it's going to split right open in this particular instance. You see, those legs were built to hold the weight of a full tank of oil for 25 years. But we see them sitting there for 50, 60, 75 years. And eventually it's going to give out. And lastly, we're almost immune to seeing that lovely little white waterfall coming down the sides, the corrosion. You just expect it on these older tanks. It comes down the side, it curls underneath. That corrosion is slowly serving like an acid, eating away at the outside of the tank. And what we can't see is the reason why tanks leak. On the inside, it's very basic science that you know, and you probably communicate to them. We may have new home inspectors here, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. You have a capsule. Inside the capsule is a liquid, the oil. As that liquid level gets lower and lower, the walls above the liquid level begin to sweat. Condensation begins to form on the walls, and it drips down and it drips down, and over time it's dripping down, and eventually the water and the oil don't mix. The water gets trapped underneath because the oil rises, as we know, and the water that's trapped underneath begins rusting out the inside of the tank and the lower sides. And when they pull the tank out of the ground and you see that there are pinholes, they're like this. They spike out. That's the rust spiking out. So those are some telltale signs. But here are some other things. I know you know this. You know the vent pipe and the fill pipe, and you know why there's a vent pipe and why there's a fill pipe. The vent pipe, I've had people ask me, why are there two? So I'll just say it, and you'll just forgive me if I am insulting your intelligence. The vent pipe works just like when you're opening up a can of tomato sauce. Yes, I'm from New Jersey. That's how I talk. So you have a can, you put the can opener in, you pour it, nothing comes out. You put another little nick on the other side of that can, and glub, glub, glub comes right out. That's the point of the vent pipe. You let some of the air out so it can fill in nice and smooth and fast. But these arrows are pointing to some problems in this example. The top one in the upper left looks like it could be black mold to the naked eye. It looks like there's black mold up there. Looks like moisture, like maybe the basement is taking some water through the cinder blocks right there. What it actually is, it's a leaking pipe inside the wall. That's what that stain is. The fill pipe has a crack in it somewhere inside the cinder blocks. So that's one thing you're going to look for. Now you're seeing the leak on the right-hand side down here at the bottom, but it's coming through the wall. It's not coming through the tank. It is coming from the fill pipe. Just things to look for. More clues. Here's some clues that there may have been or currently is an underground oil tank. We have a fill pipe over here. There's a vent, there's a fill pipe. For this oil tank outside, what the heck is this guy over here? That's something that you'll tell them to do. They need to bring in a professional. They need to bring in a specialist to examine what's going on. They should probably have a tank sweep done at this point. Anyway, there is a wayward fill pipe right there. And it doesn't appear to have been sawed down or anything. So that warrants further investigation. Now, number 2 also is blown up on the lower right-hand corner. You see this tiny little mark by the skinny orange arrow that I'm circling? It's a little pipe coming from the wall, and it's going into the cement floor. Here's a close-up of it in the lower right-hand corner. That's for an underground oil tank right there. So that would warrant further investigation. And in this case, some other things that you can look for, if it's an unfinished basement and the cement is it's a cement floor, and then you see an area that's a little rough and it looks like it was poured with fresh cement. Could have been 20 years ago, but it looks like there was a fresh pour somewhere. We can always see that. That's an indication that there was a fill pipe there at some point. Something to keep in mind. Another indication, if you're looking at a cement floor and you see a line going down the floor from one side, what they used to do is they used to pour concrete over the fill pipes. And so the line, you could always see it. So that is an indication. And in picture number 3, coming from the ceiling, there's 2 pipes right there. And in picture number 4, there's 2 pipes coming in right there. So these just they may or may not be. They may be decommissioned. They may be abandoned in place. They may be gone, but they certainly warrant further investigation. And speaking of further investigation, some people are pretty darn clever. This is a beautifully manicured pathway, and there is a pretty rock out of nowhere on display right there. Can you see it? It's like a little statue of a rock right there. Well, the home inspector who inspected this property kicked that little rock over. And what did he discover on the right-hand side? An uncapped fill pipe. See it? On the right-hand side. So something to, and there, this is for perspective, something to be aware of. This is what a capped fill pipe looks like. It should have been cut down and capped. There are 4 very thick screws, I think they're square even, that go in there. You'll also look for hidden pipes in shrubbery, in landscaping. People are sneaky. And the tank sweep. The tank sweep it's important. Items have been found. I don't know if you guys do a tank sweep. You don't always find an underground tank with it. We did one on a property, one of my listings, and found an old abandoned dry well. We have found refrigerators. We have found cars that were buried underground. I guess people have backhoes and they just bury them. We're still looking in New Jersey to find Jimmy Hoffa here somewhere. We're sure we're going to find him. We're looking. Okay. All right. How about these babies right here? I know you've seen them. Because they're still out there. They're in wonderful homes even. Yeah, some of them are in money pits. Some of them are in like these awful homes. Or some of them are in like, you recognize it when you see it. The flips, you know a flip when you see it. What's a flip? A flip is a shiny money pit, right? Some of these are in money pits. Some of them are on flips, in foreclosures. But they also exist in homes that are loved. And you know that too. You can tell when a house is tight, right? When the homeowner has taken really good care of the house and didn't just slap it together for resale. So, you do see these in those homes. And we need to be able to talk about why. Why are they still there? Why did Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner pay this expensive new kitchen, a new bath, new roof, beautiful new landscaping, and these monstrosities are in the basement still heating the house? Well, if it ain't broke, why fix it, right? A lot of them feel that way. Nothing wrong with my system, sturdy as a tank, and they're not replacing them. They're still heating the houses because you see, the thing is, these systems were built so well back in the day, they don't die. These systems never die. And one of the reasons they don't die is because the proper maintenance of an oil heated home is to have a tune up once a year. You call the guy, he comes to the house, he vacuums out any dust, he tightens anything that's loose, he changes the filter, and he recommends preemptive fixing so you don't get stuck in the middle of the night during a blizzard on a holiday with no heat. So a lot of these systems, as you've seen from opening them up, are rebuilt on the inside. You can't represent it. If they ask you what the life expectancy is, we all say the same thing. We all say, well, 25 years, But the truth is, who the heck knows? It depends on how well they were taken care of. But you still you can't say anything about it. You can say that it's reached the end of its economic life, but we don't have to scare them. Your realtors don't want you to scare their buyers. So we can still say it without scaring them. And here's what we do. Listen, this is what I would say. If you love this house and you really want to move forward, but you're scared of this system, here's what you should do. Ask the homeowner who services the heating system and ask them to get you an electronic copy of the maintenance records, because the maintenance records will tell the story of whether it was a money pit, whether it was neglected, or if it was loved. And if it was loved, they can feel a lot better about moving forward with a plan. Because you guys know the past 3 years, sellers aren't fixing anything the past 3 years. The sellers called the shots. It has been a crazy, crazy market. However, you can also point out to them that, if you check the maintenance records and you see that it's been well maintained, I can't guarantee it's not going to break closing. I can't guarantee it's not going to die when you turn it on next season, but the records will give you a little peace of mind. And here's what you should probably do. You should probably think about upgrading it. Put some money aside and upgrade it. And then they're thinking, oh, yeah, that's easy for you to say, Mr. Home Inspector. I just spent an extra 10 grand to buy this house to beat out 25 other buyers who wanted it. Who has $10,000 lying around to upgrade this system? Well, you see, that's the problem. They think it's going to cost $10,000. It doesn't have to. They don't have to spend that kind of money. The truth is, they can get a $10,000 system if they want to. Yes, they're right. They can get a top of the line Buderis, which is whisper quiet, and it is beautiful. It has blue sapphire paint with sparkles. It's sparkly, but who needs it? All they need is a middle of the line Wheel McLean installed for less than $5,000. Now that's the market, that's the price of it, and you'd have to pay to have it installed. But a middle of the line system, it doesn't even have to be 95% efficient. Just, 85, 87 is fine. And they will take away the old system and install a new system for under $5,000. And you can tell them, I did it at my house 2 years ago because my heating system died because I waited also. And 2 years ago, my fuel company charged me $4,825. That's it. Nothing over it. And they took away the old system. They installed the new system. And that day, my usage dropped. If you upgrade to an energy efficient system, your usage will, depending on how old the old system was and how, like if it was operating at 55% efficiency, you can instantly reduce your heating bills by 40% because the system will need to use less gallons to heat the same space. Those old clunkers need all that extra fuel because they're working so hard to heat the house. So if they were using 1,300 gallons with the old system, they'll only need 700. That's how you save money when you buy an oil heated home. You save money by investing money because heating and cooling take up about 47% of your energy costs. So it's really important. And the best part is the money. They can get up to $1,900. This is a rebate program through the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association. I recommend everyone on this webinar write down that website that's in yellow right now. Upgrade and save ct.com.
I will also post that on our website.
Say that again?
I'm going to post that up on our website too.
Phenomenal. Now, if we run out of grant money, we are in the process of getting more grant money. We have to get it every year. When they click on that link, they say, we just ran out of funds. We are re-upping in February, something like that. So, but it will give you live information of what's coming. It may even be raised if we get more grant money, and it will tell you what the status is. You can get up to $1,000 for an oil-fired boiler. Hard to say, oil-fired. I'll never say that 3 times fast. For a boiler or a furnace. You can get up to $300 for a new above-ground double-walled tank, and you can get $600 of tax credits when you file your income tax. That's gold right there. And I can tell you, Maryland has no money because we are lobbying to get their funds replenished. We are trying to get them the grant to get it for 2024. I can tell you New Jersey just went from $1,400 down to $700, but Connecticut is holding tight at $1,900. It's a good thing.
Susan, how are we doing on time? Because we're an hour in. We usually just go from 7 to 8 p.m.
Okay, I'm on slide 46 of 48.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I'm good. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. And you guys, you may want to just take a picture of this screenshot because you can help someone who bought an old rickety house, and you can show them how they can lower their heating costs by as much as 65%. Upgrading to the new system, schedule that tune-up every single year, because when you get it tuned up, it automatically reduces fuel usage by 10%, because a tight system requires less fuel to operate. Install a programmable thermostat with smart heating. You can reduce it by 10%, and lower the dial on that hot water heater in the basement from factory settings, which are 140 down to 120. You'll lower it by 5%. Combine all that, you can reduce your heating costs by 65%. That's a big deal. And we're done. All I'm asking for, if you have a moment, if you liked what I brought to the table today, if you would open up your cell phone browser and go to www.oilheatpros.com/win, scroll down a little bit, enter your zip code, scroll down a little bit more, and just put your name and your email address in. I won't spam you, I promise. And there's a box there that asks for feedback. If you felt that I delivered value today, I beg you to leave feedback. The reason I'm asking for feedback is we are right now negotiating with Connecticut to get that grant replenished. And we are going to send your feedback directly to the decision makers to get that money. It means that I keep educating Connecticut, the realtors and the home inspectors. It means that you get access to that grant money. And it also means that as a thank you for leaving some feedback, we'll enter each one of you who does in a drawing for $1,000 American Express gift card.
Susan, I'll also post that on our website too. So
can you do that? That would be fabulous.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And last but not least, my contact information. Feel free to add me on Facebook. I'm a lot of fun. So feel free to add me on Facebook. And if you need us, there's my phone number. Don't
Susan, we do have one more question and then we'll call it a night. And first, thank you so much for the information.
You're
One of
welcome.
our inspectors wants to know, how do they keep new biofuel from gelling when if it's stored outside?
There's an ingredient there's an additive that they put inside.
Perfect.
That's part
Perfect.
of the blend. What is a great
Excellent.
question. Yep. So Jeannie is going to send you an email with my contact information and how to leave feedback. And if everybody could do that when you get that email, maybe you can forward it on to the people who were here. It'll
Yep.
help us get that money. And we need to get that money for that grant.
We
Okay.
definitely will. Thank you
for
so
inviting me.
much.
Very
Thank
happy.
you, Susan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Have a great
Bye.
night.
Bye.
You
Take
too.
care.